This week, could the school shooting in Wisconsin have been prevented? Our panel weighs in. Donald Trump speaks to the press for over an hour, and the press seems more irritated with him than ever before. And ABC pays $15 million to help build the future Trump presidential library. Speculation on why the network settled coming up. These stories and much more straight ahead this week on The Lion Week in Review. Welcome into this week's edition of The Lion Week in Review. It's a weekly look at the culture, the courts, your state capitol, and your kids. I'm Chris Stegall. Now let's meet our panel, some of the men and women behind the stories at readlion.com. Josh Mann, our managing editor. Michael Ryan, executive editor. And Adam Wittenberg is deputy managing editor at The Lion. Gentlemen, welcome to you all as we dive into the news stories of the week. And it's a heavy one. You always hate to start any show with this story, a school shooting. This time, what makes it unique, Adam? Actually, Michael, if I could, I'll start with you. This is a young girl, a 15-year-old girl, attending the Christian school. News is she's transferred in. What do you know, and your kind of initial thoughts on this story?
Well, the New York Post reported that she had a habit of wearing a shirt and tie, jeans, and combat boots, which is an unusual attire for school. But on this particular occasion, she wore a T-shirt that seemed to be an ode to Columbine, in that it featured a German band whose name means no pity for the majority. So it was an odd choice of attire that day. She apparently slammed down energy drinks right and left. She had a troubled home life. One parent said that she weirded out the girl at the locker next to her. And one parent also said that she died a broken girl, which absolutely she appears to have, and you have to wonder why nobody saw her breaking.
Adam, now I turn to you because we were talking just before we began the show. You said you had a little experience with teaching, working in a Christian school. Something that I wondered, just personally, was, is this girl a transfer? It does, in fact, appear she was at 15, hasn't been at that school long. Very troubled. And here's a tough question, but an honest one. And I'd ask you to answer it with some perspective of your own. Do Christian schools bear some responsibility to better vet kids who are troubled and their families who are troubled like this?
Yeah, Chris, that's an excellent question. I really do think there is a responsibility. Now, I believe strongly in Christian school. I taught in one for several years, and it can be a redeeming and hopeful force in a child and a family's life. But we also kind of have to know the limitations, that if you have a child who's intensely broken or has a very difficult home life, just throwing them in this environment does not instantly solve their problems. And I've been talking to a lot of schools this week, Christian schools across the country, and a lot of them have on-site counselors. They have different ways of helping students and even helping families. But I don't know about this particular school. But I think it can kind of cut both ways, that just sending your kid to Christian school is not a cure-all, and especially later in life. And if a school did agree to take in a student that they know has a single-parent household or has different, maybe it was transferring out because of some problems or kind of wearing some of these clothings, if you're not observing that and saying, hey, maybe we need to pay more attention, I don't think you're doing your duty.
Josh, this is a tricky one, and it's one that I've explored on other shows. My wife and I do a show on encouraging Christian education ourselves, and one of the things that is a consistent theme is, are you running from public school or are you running to Christian school? And these days, as the growth of Christian school is happening, Josh, we find that a lot of people are in fact just fleeing bad situations or perhaps trying to help a troubled child by, let's put them in a Christian school. That can be a real recipe for trouble, as this Christian school has discovered. What responsibility have Christian schools to try to police this better?
Yeah, I think Christian schools, they're already, they determine, when they determine their mission and admissions policy, they determine what kind of Christian school they're going to be. And we see a lot of different kinds of Christian schools who take different approaches. Some of them are more evangelistic. They want to really reach out to the community to have maybe wider open doors to folks who don't come from Christian families. Other schools, though, require maybe one or both parents to be committed Christians, to attend church regularly. They may have more stringent admissions policies for troubled children who maybe they don't feel like they can educate. And so It's a decision Christian school administrators have to make, school founders have to make. But then certainly if you're going to have a kind of transfer policy where you might get a troubled kid, then you have to think about all those security protocols. How do we ensure that this child is well taken care of and that we're seeing the warning signs in a case like this? And so, administrators, I'm sure, are taking a second look on their admissions policies after an event like this, and we'll just have to continue. I know here at the Herzog Foundation, we do great world-class training in not just security, but in developing a mission, developing a healthy school that understands its mission and what it's all about.
Let me ask a tough question, and then I'll move on to the next story of the day. Michael, I'll start with you. Could this have been prevented with better screening, do you believe? Could this Christian school have staved this off if they had better known or more acted on what they knew about this family and this broken child's life?
Well, I think that's definitely something that the Christian school community needs to look at. But somebody who's troubled is going to be troubled in any environment. The thing is that you can't just drop off somebody, if this was the case, you can't just drop somebody off in a good Christian environment and expect that person to be fixed. When somebody does something this horrific, as this person said about her, that she died a broken girl, you've got to see the signs. You've got to look for the signs, and you've got to investigate what's going on in this girl's life. And it can't just be the school. It has to be the home and anybody else, maybe the courts, whatever. But somebody from just about every aspect of life has to look into this person's situation and do something.
Adam, just briefly, could this have been prevented in your view?
Yeah, I mean, Chris, not knowing the actual people or the actual school, it does appear that there could have been, and maybe we'll find out there were efforts to intervene or to get family help or counseling, but without knowing that, it certainly does look like perhaps more could have been done.
Josh, how about you?
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know, but certainly I think all of these things need to be looked at, and so hopefully schools are looking hard at their policies and can be better moving forward.
And in fact, Adam, you did write about this. You said you talked to several schools about their preparedness. Do you think Christian schools across the board now are reviewing just exactly what their admissions policies are, what the family commitment is to the movement, how the home life is? I mean, I think you have to now start scrutinizing, don't you? Yeah,
absolutely. And I was encouraged that I think I interviewed 4 different schools in a couple of states, and most of them have, locked doors. They have visitors showing ID or doing instant background checks. Some of them have license plate readers in the parking lot. I mean, there are many of them have even a security officer or more on campus. So I think some of the basic things, or cameras as well, are being dealt with in a good way. But there was one school that really stood out, Westminster, outside St. Louis Christian Academy, and they have an anonymous tip line. And they've had it since 2018, and it's marketed mostly for students, but anyone could call in. And they said they've only had one blatantly false claim, and that was when they first opened it. But really, for the last 6 years, it's been there. They get 10 to 12 calls a semester, and it's just a helpful way to prevent, to allow security or administrative or counseling personnel to look into, check in with, and be alert of any possible comment, bad behavior, bad mood, or just any dynamic welling up. And 6 years, one false call, and that was at the start. I think it's something that more schools should be looking into.
Josh Mann, another story at readlion.com. Never have we spent more on education, public education, in any given year. I don't think the number is ever reduced in virtually any state. It's always an increase. And yet, you have a story about the crumbling infrastructure in public schools.
Yeah, what we're seeing in a lot of districts are shrinking student populations. That's a demographic issue. It's a baby bust issue, as well as the literal fleeing of families from public education to alternatives. But as these districts shrink, their aging buildings, which are now too large for their student populations, are needing quite a bit of repairs, and the cost is enormous. And so there's a huge problem that these districts face. Do they consolidate? Do they sell off buildings? They can't afford to build new ones. So it is a real problem, but the other issue is that the academic results in public education have been in decline. And so a lot of families wonder whether their tax dollars would be well spent on these sorts of infrastructure projects. Let me read to you one line that our writer wrote. This was an op-ed and beautifully done. Against this backdrop of dismal academic performance, the argument to lavish yet more taxpayer money just on building maintenance rings increasingly hollow, especially compared to the success of alternative educational solutions, which would include Christian education of various stripes.
Michael, I turn to you on that note, what Josh just shared. It sure seems like the public still clamors for alternatives to public education out there.
Absolutely. It's about freedom. It's about freedom of choice. And freedom is not a fad. School choice is not a fad. Freedom is a human need, and it's a human right. And this is like rock and roll. It's not going to go away. And by the way, it looks like, the public schools are very hidebound and stuck to these brick and mortar institutions that are, 50, 60 years old. The average age is 49, and most have never had a major renovation. And they're one size fits all. So as enrollments grow or shrink, they're not able to adapt like the Christian schools that are just popping up. They're popping up, by the way, in churches, in strip malls, in homes and hybrids, and even in old public schools.
Panel, thank you. When we get back, we're going to get into an interesting press conference Donald Trump, the president-elect, gave this week, the media reaction to it, and a settled lawsuit from one high-profile member of the media between President-elect Trump and this particular network has a lot of other media. Their head's on fire about it, and we'll get into it coming up next on the Lion Week in Review. Welcome back to the Lion Week in Review. It's been a very interesting week for politics, and Donald Trump giving an hour-and-a-half-long press conference at Mar-a-Lago. Michael, your takeaway?
I think the news at a press conference is Donald Trump. If you saw the comedy film Dave, Kevin Kline plays both the President of the United States and the doppelganger who replaces him, and nobody in the country understands this or really appreciates or recognizes this, except for noted conspiracy theorist and paranoid Oliver Stone filmmaker. And I think part of the thing about Donald Trump at this press conference was our story starts with a relaxed President-elect Trump. I think those are the key words. This guy does seem different from 2016 in his first term. I don't know if it's, the fire of the lawfare that he walked through or the assassination attempts on him. You would think that would change somebody, and people do change. Our perceptions of them, not so much. I was interested in this, and I just out of curiosity, I Googled Trump seems different. And so I got CNN entering a second term, Trump's with both the experience of having done the job before and a wealth of resentments over how he believes the system failed him. The Atlantic, Trump looks older and more deranged. MSNBC, Trump's incoherence seems to be getting worse. That tells you everything you need to know about the media. I have seen a different Trump, and that's totally different from what you just heard from the media. He seems calmer. He seems kinder. He seems more self-assured, less cocky, and there is a difference between those two. He's just as clear and coherent. He's just as principled. You would think that would be welcomed in today's society after 4 years of chaos, after an incoherent Harris campaign, and with the world aflame, but no.
And their passions are even more whipped up this week in most of media as they discuss a $15 million settlement between Donald Trump, ABC News, and George Stephanopoulos. Most media reacting to this very negatively. I wanted to get the panel's reaction to a discussion. Brian Stelter on CNN as he breaks down why he thinks this settlement came about, and then I'll ask the panel to react. Take a listen.
Look, Stephanopoulos has been a Trump target for a long time. He was very aggressive in this interview that aired in March. So Trump decided to file a suit about a week later, and a judge did not throw it out. A judge let it go forward through the discovery process. So it's possible that ABC decided to settle this, Jim, because there might have been embarrassing emails or text messages on ABC's servers that were going to become public.
Yeah, now this is an interesting thing, Josh Mann, because this is the first time we've heard anybody suggest George Stephanopoulos and ABC News settled this because there might be more in discovery on Donald Trump's behalf that could embarrass them. and that they were avoiding being embarrassed. Other media have been screaming and yelling, this is chilling, this is threatening free speech. So how do you read it as a member of the media, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a general caution about the litigious nature of society. Like, I'm not sure that that's a good thing. But in this specific case, clearly the media, I mean, they buried a number of stories about Trump's 2016 opponent. They trumped up, no pun intended, the Russian hoax claims. CBS, Catherine Herridge says that CBS wouldn't let her publish what she had on the Biden laptop story. Clearly, the media wasn't doing their job. And so I think a settlement like this is welcome. It's a warning that journalists need to be careful and to do their jobs and not, go after somebody they disagree with politically or vice versa.
I mean, Adam, the threshold is super high for a public official, never mind somebody like Donald Trump, arguably the most famous man in the world, to prove defamation versus a media member is almost impossible. It's unheard of. So for George Stephanopoulos and ABC News to settle, and in fact, a good chunk of this money, if not most of it's going to help build Donald Trump's presidential library, which is also sort of interesting. But Adam, this is a huge, in my view, admission by ABC News. What are your thoughts? Because we're specifically talking about calling Donald Trump a convicted rapist, which is what many media members have said. They've consistently identified him as a convicted rapist, which he is not. Mm-hmm. So your reaction?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think two things. It's actually brilliant that Trump is fighting back in a way that the left has tended to fight, filing dirty lawsuits or calling names. And finally, I think for too long, conservatives have just kind of rolled over and taken it and accepted this liberal media bias or even agenda. And so I'm glad he fought back. I think the other point is, this reminds me of like hidden camera videos I've seen on X or formerly Twitter from folks who've gone undercover. They'll take a staffer out. I think one I saw was from CNN, and it's usually a woman having a drink or two with him and then getting him talking about his job. And it's like, oh yeah, our whole agenda in 2019 or 2020 was to get Trump out. We kept the ticker on the thing of how many were dead from COVID to keep people in a panic. And then once we get him out, we're going to do this. I mean, this is like one of the more senior news directors at CNN, caught on hidden camera admitting we have an agenda to do this to Donald Trump to get him out. So I think it's good that this was exposed. I do think, well, given that, there could be credibility to that claim that maybe there's more internal emails, internal discussions. ABC did not want to come out maybe saying something similar.
Chris Cillizza, a well-known journalist, has his own podcast, because most people do these days. He and Van Jones of CNN are having a rather honest heart-to-heart about Trump, and Van Jones has something kind of surprising about Donald Trump and what he feels he's discovered as a member of the media and this latest campaign. Let's take a watch.
Guys, can we cut it out? Donald Trump is not an idiot. Donald Trump, let me just be very clear. Donald Trump is smarter than me, you, and all critics. You know why we know? Because he has the White House, the Senate, the House.
Totally agree.
Court, the popular vote. He has a massive media ecosystem bigger than the mainstream built around him and for him, and a religious fervor in a political movement around him. And his best buddy is the richest person in the history of the world, and the most relevant Kennedy is with him. This dude is a phenomenon. He is the most powerful human on earth and in our lifetime.
And, I have to marvel at that because, Michael, you'd think to listen to them talk that it happened in a vacuum over a trance or something. I wonder if they think to themselves, how did we get here, if in fact what they're saying is true?
Yeah, it reminds me of the old saw that when you're 18, you think your parents are the dumbest things in the world, and when you're 21, you're amazed at what they've learned in 3 short years. It's also interesting from the standpoint that the people who are meeting with Donald Trump since the election are coming out of those meetings saying, this guy has never been sharper. He's never been more on his game. He is really focused. And I mentioned earlier how he seems calmer and kinder and, just more focused on things. So, he may have changed, but not quite as much as some of these people on the left think.
Adam, this hypnotic trance Van Jones seems to think that he has over media and all of his voters, 76 million voters. Is it a hypnotic trance, or is it just an outgrowth of people desperately wanting something different?
Yeah, I definitely think it's the outgrowth of people wanting something different. One of the beauties of Trump is he says what people are actually thinking, and he does what people actually want done. And he's not bridled like a typical politician who is engaged in doublespeak or almost never lets their true intentions be said clearly and boldly. And Trump has stood up. He said, no, this is what I want. This is what I'm going to do. He was pretty effective in his first term in doing a lot of the things that he said. Obviously not all. But yeah, we have every reason to believe that he will make every effort to follow through in the second term, and that explains a lot of his popularity.
On a previous show, we discussed the story of the United Healthcare CEO shot in the back, murdered in cold blood. What is increasingly clear is several members of the media think that if it's not deserved, they see parallels with another media story in the Daniel Penny verdict. And Stephanie Ruhle on MSNBC makes this kind of vulgar comparison, and we'll get the panel's reaction on the other side of this clip.
Right. We saw Daniel Penny, his acquittal, and at the same time, and a very, very, very different situation, but Luigi Mangione, the man who's now accused of the murder of the United Healthcare CEO, two very different situations, but in both situations, there's a person dead. And reactions that we are seeing are hugely celebratory in some circles, right? J.D. Vance is taking Daniel Penny to the Army-Navy football game tomorrow. And what we've seen in the last few years, right, we see the media divide us. We see that, sex sells, but anger and hate sells even more. How concerned should we be, though?
Josh, man, I'll start with you. She said a couple of times, these are entirely different stories, but seemed to go on to make the comparison that Daniel Penny and that case of him taking down someone on a subway who was violently threatening people in the subway car is the same kind of story as this United Healthcare CEO being gunned down.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible that she would make that comparison. Celebration, I mean, so in Penny's case, you had a jury, first of all, who found him not guilty. He was found not guilty of intentionally killing a man. And so he was protecting others, and his defense said so. Whereas with Luigi, the man accused of killing the CEO, it appears that he very intentionally targeted that man. He knew what time to be there. He wanted that man dead. So just the facts of what happened are completely different. Then the celebration. What people are celebrating in the Penny case is the acquittal of a man who was trying to protect other people. Lawfully. The people celebrating Mangione are celebrating a cold-blooded murder of the head of a health insurance company because they don't like health insurance, or they don't like the way that some health insurance companies deny claims. Those are two very different stories, and it's pretty gross that they got compared that way in the media.
Yeah, Michael, your thoughts with just about a minute to go here. Daniel Penny, Mangione, same guy. I heard this 1,000 times. You heard Stephanie Ruhle say it.
Yeah, absolutely outrageous. The thing is that this person was trying to save somebody on the subway versus somebody who was actually shooting somebody. There's no comparison between the two. Donald Trump has always made the left's heads explode. I think the twisted logic that you're seeing out there now is post-explosion. I mean, this is what you see after people's minds have already exploded.
Panel, thank you. When we get back, we'll take a look at their favorite stories of the week at readlion.com when the Lion Week in Review continues. Welcome back to the Lion Week in Review. I'm Chris Stegall, back with our panel, Michael, Josh, and Adam. And Adam, we start with you. We always like to take a look at all the stories at readlion.com, but ask the panel to select their favorite. You have a favorite this week?
Yeah, absolutely. It is the security follow in Christian schools. It highlights this Missouri school that has the anonymous tip line. And I think the very sad events of the school shooting in Madison, Wisconsin is a reminder for all schools, especially Christian schools, and even small ones. I want to urge you, even if you're a micro school, a small school, do you have security protocol? And but it's twofold. It's, do you have, maybe cameras or locks on your doors and things like that? But also, do you know your students? Are you observing problems right in your midst or little tips? Are you aware, and are you able to take action?
Critically important. And admissions processes, I hope every school will take a hard look at who they're admitting into their schools. Important work at readline.com.
Yes, or even not inviting students back.
Yeah.
Christian schools, I know you want to do your mission. I know it's from God, and generally that means taking in, as many as you can. But if you're not equipped to handle a student with a severely broken situation, or if you do take them in, you need to have a plan or early warning signs.
Great advice. Josh Mann, your favorite story this week?
Well, there was a silver lining that I wanted to point out about how the school in Madison, Abundant Life Christian Academy, responded. And we see this in a lot of stories where Christians are facing death or other kinds of tragedies, and Christians have a particular way of responding. And it's biblical, it's Christian, and it can only be explained by God. This woman who was speaking on behalf of the school at a press conference said, "We also have a very strong faith in our community that in spite of tragedy, God is working." She said, "We believe that God is good in everything and that he turns beauty for ashes." And so I had a number of families, she went on, who mentioned that to me, that this wasn't a surprise to God and that he's going to do something mighty with it. Now, the school is still going to have to think about the policies that may have led to this, but Christians have a peculiar way of responding to tragedy, and it sees hope in situations, and it sees God's ability to turn things for the better.
Michael Ryan, your favorite story of the week at readline.com.
Well, he means peculiar in a good way, right?
That's exactly
All
right.
right. I'm going with the same story. It's the biggest story of the week. It's one of the biggest stories of the year. And some people want to make it about guns. It's not. It's not about gun laws. There is no law you can pass that would prevent determined treachery, and that's what this was. This is about mental health and the signs that we need to see and the steps that we need to take to prevent this kind of tragedy. It's also about something the chief of police talked about. He talked about the fact that you don't need metal detectors in schools. All evidence to the contrary. He says it's a safe space. Well, how did this happen if it was a safe space? Are you going to apply that safe space thing to police headquarters, courthouses, airports? I think not. So there were a lot of issues coming out of this story, and it's one of the most important of the year.
Panel, great work. Another heavy week, unfortunately, but an important bit of news that you cover each and every day so well at readline.com. And be sure to go to that website so that you can see all the latest up-to-date news that's constantly breaking at readline.com. And that will do it for us this week. Be sure to keep up to date, as I said, on all the latest news every day at readline.com. Merry Christmas to each and every one of you listening and watching. And until next time, we'll see you right here at the Lion Week in Review.